Welcome, foolish mortals, to Halloween treats presented by the Lookback Machine. For the entire month of October, we bring you 31 episodes on 31 flicks. So sit back and relax on your broomstick. We have blood-curdling boogeyman and sadistic serial killers. From castles to were-rabbits to spine-chilling spine-tinglers. Oh, but that's not all. It's only a bit. There's also Dahmer, Dracula, and Wallace and Gromit. So turn down the lights and turn up the sound. And ready your heart, for it's about to pound. Because there's Halloween film history abound. Happy Halloween from the Lookback Machine. (1896), Palais Garniers, the Opera House. A chandelier falls from the ceiling, killing one person. The cause? A fire on the roof. But if you ask some others who were there, a ghost. It was also the inspiration for Gaston Leroux, a newspaper reporter who took the incident and romanticized it into the Phantom of the Opera. In 1925, Lon Chaney Sr. took up the role of the Phantom, and when the Man of 1,000 Faces was unmasked for the first time, Picture and Picture-goers wrote, "Chaney has never succeeded in making himself look quite so horrible as he does with this particular makeup." Then it was 75 years later that Disney hired writer Stuart Krieger to take the Phantom out of the Paris Opera House and into a local Cineplex. This is the Phantom of the Megaplex. Writer Stuart Krieger.
This is exactly what I got, and it was hilarious. I got a phone call from Michael, and he said, "I came up with the title last night. I have no idea what the movie is. Will you come pitch me something?" So what he handed me was Phantom of the Megaplex, and then said, "I love the title. I don't know what the movie is. Come talk to me." So that was how it started. Well, you get the inspiration when your executive hands you the title and says, "We need it." So that's kind of, and that was another one. There was a little bit more lag time on that one than some of them because it was from the ground up. And then again, it was, kind of figuring based on that, using Phantom of the Opera as the source material in terms of kind of broad structure, but then adapting that notion to the Disney Channel universe. And so that was what I started from. And, again, it's always, for me, I'm a much more character-driven writer, so it's always like, who's our protagonist? What's his problem? How's this situation he's found him in going to help him work through his problem? So the whole idea of Pete as the overworked, overachiever kid trying to find kind of a life within all of that was the kind of the jumping off point, and then building the family from there. And one of the other really interesting things always at Disney Channel is they were more in favor of dead parents than divorced parents. And it was something, again, no matter how many times I argued, I could never quite figure out what that was all about. And I think, and I haven't seen it in quite a while, but I think I actually won a dead parent in this one. I think there was actual, I'm not positive because, like I said, I haven't seen it in a while. But I remember on a couple of them there was the fight of, if we want single parent, why can't we deal with the lost thing? And I think it was, for them, it just felt like more complexity and more like, I guess, sadness you would have to deal with or whatever. But
Director Blair Trio.
It's a variation on an old theme, the Phantom of the Opera, but there's kind of a contemporary twist to it. And I liked Stu's writing, and I thought that it was funny, and I thought it was engaging, and so it was an easy read for me. And usually, if it just flows for me, it makes sense. If it flows off the page, then it's a lot easier to make it work for the screen. Yeah, because that's my job, is to basically take what the writer has done and execute it well and make it so that it works on a big screen. So it seemed to flow pretty easy. It held my attention, and so it wasn't a tough choice. And I also thought that this had the potential to be kind of a perennial favorite I didn't know how long. You know, you never know how long these things are going to last. You don't know how long what the shelf life is going to be on these movies. But this one has at the time. I mean, quite candidly, I thought it was. If I'm being honest, I thought it was just okay. You know, given the limitations that we had, I thought it was. You know, I thought we did a good job on it. It wasn't a blockbuster, but I didn't know how long it would last, and it seems to have endured through, you know, a couple of decades. So that's, I guess, that answered that question.
Writer Stuart Krieger.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I felt, and I hope he did too, is it was a really easy and collaborative partnership in terms of once Blair was hired, we just got along really well, and there wasn't a whole lot of, I mean, we didn't really do a whole lot of rewriting even once he came on the script, but everything about, you know, kind of how we saw the characters, how we saw all the supporting kids, I thought he did an incredible job at the cast. One of the things that's such an incredible joy and gift of being a writer is you sit alone in your room looking at the blank computer screen and start dreaming this stuff up and describing things and describing locations and describing characters, and it's never not a complete and total thrill the first time you walk onto a location and look around and everything looks like you thought it would look. You know, look how you imagined it. And in that case in particular, I remember the first day at the theater and seeing all the kids coming out with their uniforms and Taylor with his little bow tie and vest and, you know, all of those things and going, oh man, you know, looking at the marquee and all the titles of the movies that I had made up and just all of that. And suddenly when everything's in front of you and fully three-dimensional in there, it's a thrill. And that was another, I have a very, very specific memory of getting out of the production car and walking up to the theater and seeing the posters, and seeing the marquee and seeing the kids in their little uniforms and going, yeah, this is cool.
Well, we shot at a major Cineplex or multiplex. I'm not sure what it was, but it was in a major thoroughfare in Toronto on Yonge Street. And it was an operating theater. So we had to move around and work around their daily operations. And of course, we had to close certain screens, but we didn't have complete run of the place. We had to kind of work with them as they were trying to manage the daily operations.
Let's pause for a brief second and talk about Mickey Rooney, or as the New York Times wrote in his obituary, the world's top box office star at 19 as the irrepressible Andy Hardy, a bankrupt has-been in his 40s, and a comeback kid on Broadway as he neared his 60s. Rooney was huge at the box office. He was the #1 star in 1939, 1940, and 1941. He left his home studio, MGM, to create his own studio. But that failed and Rooney went belly up. But in spite of that, he was in the motion picture business for an astounding 90 years and was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. Oh, and one more thing. He hated exploitative horror films. When Silent Night, Deadly Night, the horror Christmas classic, was released in 1984, Rooney wrote a letter protesting the film.
How dare they? I'm all for the First Amendment, but don't give me Santa Claus with a gun running around trying to kill someone. The scum who made that movie should be run out of town.
Rooney was on his high horse, but because of the ups and downs of his career, he wound up starring in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker, as Joe Petto, an elderly man who dresses up as Santa and murders people.
With special effects by screaming Mad George Inc. of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, comes the most incredible night yet. Mickey Rooney stars in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker.
Merry Christmas!
Luckily, Phantom of the Megaplex was family-friendly horror, and no protestations came from Rooney. In fact, the man who had a curmudgeonly reputation was a joy to be around.
Yeah, Mickey Rooney was an absolute delight to work with. I've worked with him a couple of times, actually, and I cannot remember. There was a short project that I did with him. It was for an episodic television series, and I can't remember if that came before this or if this came before that, but on both occasions, he was just a delight to work with. And interestingly, I just remember that before the first time I worked with him, that he had kind of a reputation for sometimes being somewhat difficult. And I don't know how widespread that was, but I had just heard that through some friends. And And I thought, I wonder why that is, because he has such a long and storied career. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit intimidated when he first came out, because I didn't know what to expect. And here's a guy who's done literally hundreds and hundreds of movies. I mean, he's been involved in this business since he was a young man, a boy, and he's been in, I don't know how many hundreds of films, 400 or 500 films. I have no idea what the number is. But anyway, so when he showed up, I didn't know what to expect. But I think one of the reasons why we just hit it off is I just showed him tremendous respect, and then he deserves it. So it was easy. I think we really hit off, and I think he responded well to that. And you've got to respect, first of all, anybody at that age, period. Anybody who's lived that long, they know something based on their life experience. But somebody who survived the movie business through, I don't know, 6 decades, 7 decades. I mean, I'm not sure when he started. I know he was very young, so maybe even 8 decades. Anybody that survived the movie business that long knows a thing or two. I mean, he's forgotten more than I will ever learn, right? So I had to respect the guy, and he was just a delight to work with. And some of the interesting things about him was, you know, in his younger years, he was noted for his tremendous ability to memorize. He could take a script and he'd have it memorized in a few days. At least that's what I had read about him. Now, in older years, he kind of lost that ability, so we had to help him out with some cue cards. But, you know, you wouldn't know it by his delivery. He was pretty seamless, and every time he always added a new little nuance to it that just made it fun. And I remember in between setups, you know, whenever you change a camera position or a lighting setup, it takes a while to reposition. And if there was a moment, we'd just sit off to the side and just talk about whatever. And he'd always, every day, he'd say to me, "Save your money, young man, save your money." and he was almost like a father figure, you know, in that regard. He was married multiple times. These were a lot of these were studio arranged marriages, and I remember just looking at him and saying, "Wow, you're married to Ava Gardner." And I just shook my head. He just laughed, and he just winked at me and said, "Save your money."
Life is like a good movie. Every moment should be savored.
Meet Movie Mason. He doesn't work here. He just thinks he does. It was Mason's family who opened the original theater on this spot in the 1920s. Mason loves movies more than anything.
Always, everything is a little bit drawn from life. And there was a character that was always around kind of everything I did in my career. There was one guy, and I'm totally blanking on his name now, but he was like a legendary Hollywood fan. In every premiere, everything, he was always there, and he was always hanging around, and but he had no official capacity with anything. And he was an older guy that, you know, after a while just sort of became the ambassador, that everybody knew him and everybody welcomed him, and he got into things by just showing up, and he always had kind of like this mangy looking sweater on, but he was everywhere. And that was kind of where that guy came from.
Children. When we arrive in this world, magic is all around us. You simply have to see a baby discover a butterfly, or a toddler splash in the bath for the first time. Yet, as years pass, simple pleasures aren't quite so simple to find. Myths and legends fall away. Santa's secrets are revealed. Card tricks lose their fascination. True wonder is harder to come by, but there's always magic at the movies. Pirate ships, bicycles that fly, angels earn their wings, beautiful women marry handsome men, and we all learn there's no place like home. To destroy that magic, to shatter those moments, to me is a sin so grave as to be almost incomprehensible. If there truly is a phantom, my young friends, I assure you, it most definitely is not me.
You know, when we were shooting that, here he is. He's already, I'm not sure how old he was at the time, but he's getting up there in years, of course, in fan of the Megaplex. And I just thought, wow, as he's talking about the magic of the movies, he knows a thing or two about the magic of the movies. And he's sincere when he's delivering those lines. And I wondered to myself as we were filming, even as we were rolling on that very scene, as he was saying those lines, I thought to myself, I wonder how many more scenes this guy's got in him. You know, he's done tens of thousands of scenes, but this is really special that Mickey Rooney, of all people, is speaking these lines. Every once in a while, when you capture a little bit of magic, it just happens in the moment. There are times when you capture it and you don't necessarily know that you've got it. You believe that you might have it, but it hasn't been through the edit yet, and you kind of feel it in your gut that you have it, but you don't really know. You just believe. But then there's those times where an actor says something that truly is magical, and it matches up with the dialogue, and you just feel it right in the moment, and you know, wow, this is, for Mickey Rooney to be saying these lines in this kind of a setting, it really is magic. And it was it was like a cinematic spiritual experience kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it any other way, but it really was magic. It really was. I mean, there's just no other way to describe it.
Since you've been so kind to seek me out, I will tell you, I had this incredibly arrogant moment of, at the very end, he says, and that's why we go to the movies, or whatever his very last line is. And when I saw the dailies before the movie was ever put together and saw the dailies of Mickey Rooney doing that, I had this flash in my head, I'll bet that will be what they'll show on his obituary. It'll be the very last thing. It'll be him turning and, delivering that line of, and it was like, yeah, not so much. It was, of course, all the Babes in Arms and Judy Garland stuff. Yeah, exactly. But I do remember having that incredibly deluded and arrogant moment of, of course that's what they'll show. But they didn't. But yes, I do, and that was something that I really spent quite a bit of time on, that monologue, because I do remember that it felt like it needs to completely and totally work for the movie to work. And, of course, in the writing of it, you have no idea who it's going to be, and I was thrilled when it ended up being Mickey Rooney.
Hooray for Hollywood, that phony super coney Hollywood. They come from Chillicothe and Paducas with their bazookas to get their name up in lights. Hooray for Hollywood. You may be homely in your neighborhood, but if you think that you can be an actor, see Mr. Factor, he'd make a monkey look good. Within a half an hour, you'll look like Tyrone Power. Hooray for Hollywood.
Thanks for listening to Halloween Treats, presented by the Lookback Machine. Stay tuned for the entire month of October for an episode every single day till November.